about carpal instability. I think it's more pertinent to talk about scapholunate dissociation, which perhaps is the commonest clinical scenario and perhaps is the single most important representative aspect of carpal instability, dissociative, that we can talk about. So here's a case in point. This is a 42-year-old right-hand gentleman who presents with left wrist pain. He had a fall and then was splinted with some pain medication, and then again he presents with no relief and some kind of a snapping sensation along with reduced grip strength. Physical examination revealed that the grip strength was reduced by about 40% as compared to the opposite side, and the scaphoid shift test was positive, along with tenderness on the dorsal aspect of the scapholunate ligament. So at this time we were entertaining a differential of a scaphoid fracture along with a wrist sprain or scapholunate ligament injury. These were his radiographs. You can see the so-called diastasis at the scapholunate interval along with a DC deformity if you look at it very carefully. So what do you do at this stage? Would you want to splint and put him on medication or put him on therapy, investigate further, or wait and watch? These are against the CT scans. If you look at it very carefully, you can see the scaphoid is jumping off the dorsal lip of the radius here, which indicates that there is a significant instability pattern along with a so-called DC pattern and a diastasis that's quite evident on these CT cuts. MRIs, to my mind, are not very contributory, so we should always take it with a pinch of salt. And so this certainly was scapholunate, and then we'll understand through the talk as to how to deal with these problems. So scapholunate dissociation is basically one of the outcomes of what is called as a fall in an outstretched hand. This is the Mayfield circle that's been shown here, wherein when there is a loading of the wrist and dorsiflexion with ulnar deviation and intercarpal pronation, there is a sequence of injuries that can occur, and one of them is scapholunate dissociation. Usually the history is that of a fall on an outstretched hand, and there is also history of strenuous work causing exacerbation of the symptoms. Clinical examination of the wrist is something that will not belabor too much on, but there are certain provocative tests that we should be aware of, such as the ballotment test, the Watson scaphoid stress test, as well as the scaphoid lift test. The ballotment test or the scaphoid shift test is wherein you bring the wrist from radial to ulnar deviation while you're putting your thumb pressure on the tubercle of the scaphoid, and that relocates a scaphoid and causes a clunk that is painful, and that is kind of indicative of a scapholunate injury. The imaging for carpal instability or for scapholunate dissociation, should that be of confirming what you know clinically and not a discovery of sorts, you should always compare it to the opposite side and always get plain x-rays in at least 2 orthogonal planes, and be aware of false positives as well as the spectrum of normalcy. The imaging basically comprises of x-rays, stress views, MRIs, CT scans, sonography, as well as you can get cine radiography or some fluoroscopy images as well. What are the image characteristics that you would see on the x-ray? It will comprise of the so-called Terry-Thomas sign, which is an increase in the diastasis or the gap between the scapholunate articulation, which is greater than 2 millimeters. There is a foreshortened scaphoid, indicating that there is a flexion of the scaphoid, which often results in the signet ring sign or the cortical ring sign. And on the lateral view, you would then see the DC deformity. The DC is basically an extension of the lunate along with the triquetrum. We'll understand that in a little bit. So to understand the DC and the VC patterns, which are kind of very confounding and very intimidating for a lot of us. I remember these terms used to scare us during our residency days, but it's really not all that difficult. So before we understand instability, I think it's very pertinent to understand what carpal stability is all about. And it is an interplay between the ligaments that impart stability to the wrist joint. We should know that the normal kinematics of the wrist joint comprise of flexion of the entire proximal row when the wrist is flexing, the same proximal carpal row will extend with the wrist in extension, and radial and ulnar deviation will cause flexion and extension respectively. Now, the proximal carpal row is often referred to as the intercalated segment because there are no direct tendinous insertions onto it, and the movements of the proximal carpal row are forced upon it by the articular surfaces of the distal radius as well as the distal carpal row. And the scaphoid, which has a normal tendency to palmar flex, and the triquetrum, which has a normal tendency to extend, whenever there is a scapholunate ligament injury, the lunate remains attached to the triquetrum, which has a normal tendency to extend, will carry the lunate along with it into extension while the scaphoid remains flexed, and this is what we refer to as the DC deformity, and vice versa. The lunate, when it remains attached to the scaphoid, when the lunotriquetral ligament is damaged, will flex along with the scaphoid, giving rise to the so-called VC deformity. And then this is what happens. These are schematic diagrams. So when you are presented with a case of a scapholunate ligament injury, we tend to ask 3 questions of the patient: where does it hurt? Can the symptoms be provoked by active or passive maneuvers? And do they experience any clicks or clunks? And then you ask 3 questions of yourself: is the proximal carpal row intact? What is the position of the lunate? And is the abnormal position intermittent or constant? And then based on the answers to these questions, if you have the diagnosis that is clinched as scapholunate ligament injury, the next natural step is that of arthroscopy. We should treat this because there is a known predisposition for development of arthritic changes. Most of the procedures aim to repair the dorsal aspect of the scapholunate ligament because that is the strongest and the most robust part of the ligament. Treatment often depends on the classification and the surgeon preference and the needs and expectations of the patient. Mark Garcia Elias's table here is very, very useful and very practical in determining what should you do based on answers in yeses and nos to these 6 questions. Dynamic and static deformities. Can I just get 2 more minutes, sir, please? Yeah. So stages 1 to 3 are dynamic. What it means is that the scaphoid is still reducible, and therefore there is a potential for a reparative procedure that can be done. Whether you do it as an open or an arthroscopic procedure is immaterial, but this indicates that the scaphoid is reducible. Whereas stages 4, 5 are the static deformity, wherein more often than not you would be required to do a reconstructive procedure such as a ligament reconstruction using a tendon graft, whereas stage 6 is where you will be required to do a salvage procedure because already arthritic changes have set in. There are a myriad options that are available for us in literature, right from arthroscopic to open, and then simple thermal shrinkage and pinning to complex reparative and reconstructive procedures. What we do in our practice for all dynamic instability patterns is something called as the ADCLR procedure, that is the arthroscopic dorsal ligament repair surgery. Very simplistically, this procedure comprises of the standard arthroscopic setup. We bring a scope in, of course, from the 3-4 portal first, then we switch the portals between the 6R and the 3-4 portal. We identify the ligament that's torn. You get your sutures in through each limb of the ligament that is attached to the scaphoid and the lunate. Then you switch to the ulnar midcarpal portal. You withdraw those limbs out, and then you just tie sutures and get the ligament and the capsule together. So it's like a capsular ligamento-decis kind of a procedure, and that kind of completes the repair and gives you a very robust repair of the scapholunate ligament. I won't belabor too much on this video, but the arthroscopic view kind of looks something like this. Can I? I'm sorry, I think I had bookmarks to this. Yes. So let me just skip out and then show you how the arthroscopic view looks like. So this is one of the sutures coming in from the lunate remnant. That is the capitate for your reference out there. You're retrieving the sutures, as you can see in this particular video. You tie the knot, bring in that knot into the midcarpal joint, and then as you tighten the knot on the dorsal aspect of the capsule, everything comes together and a robust repair is achieved. More often than not, you would find very robust outcomes in terms of range of movement as well as grip strength. In carefully selected patients, this can be a very rewarding kind of a procedure and is your bailout for most of these injuries. With that, I thank you for your attention.